Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We'd started a recording a little earlier, but through reading through that part of the book, we realized and reaffirmed that we really don't want to cover that kind of stuff and put it out there. So we're going to have a few choice selections in here that really point out the proper doctrine or some beneficial things for edification purposes, and not so much all the errant opinions that the Gnostics believed. It is worth studying for anyone that wants to really dig in to find out what kind of perversions were being brought in. But for the nominal believer trying to be edified on Shabbat, probably not the best. So, with that, we're going to go ahead and read the next two sections together, chapter 9 and chapter 10, where it's refuting or correcting the perversions that are previously mentioned. So this is Book 1, Chapter 9, Refutation of the Impious Interpretations of these Heretics. You see, my friend, the method which these men employ to deceive themselves, while they abuse the Scriptures by endeavoring to support their own system out of them. For this reason, I have brought forward their models of expressing themselves, that thus thou mightest comprehend the deceitfulness of their procedure, and the wickedness of their error. For in the first place, if it had been Yahukanan's intention to set forth that Ogdoad above, he would surely have preserved the order of its production, and would doubtless have placed the primary tetrad first, as being, according to them, most venerable, and would have then have annexed the second, that by the sequence of the names, the order of the Ogdoad might be exhibited, and not after so long an interval, as if forgetful for the moment, and then again calling the matter to mind. He last of all made mention of the primary tetrad. In the next place, if he had meant to indicate their conjunctions, he certainly would not have omitted the name of ecclesia, while with respect to the other conjunctions, he either would have been satisfied with the mention of the male eons, since the other, like ecclesia, might be comprehended, so as to preserve the uniformity throughout. Or if he enumerated the conjunctions of the rest, he would also have announced the spouse of Anthropos, and would not have left us to find out her name by divination or trying to inquire it out. And just for everyone's knowledge, the tetrads were the trinities that they would set up in the Gnostic belief. It came originally from Egypt, where they had their ogdoads and tetrads, and it was also heavily picked up by Rome with the Nicolaitans, and even before then, they had their tritons, which triton was a false mighty one, and it was also their tritons were the groups of their three false mighty ones that they would set up to be the principalities or powers over different aspects of creation. And the one goes along with the other. They all were of the same type of pagan belief that takes the truth and perverts it, which is really the whole point, because the adversary has nothing to do with the truth. Section 2. This part is mostly with Irenaeus taking the things that he had mentioned and refuting it with reason. And then in the next chapter, we'll see that he's using the scriptures to show the proper doctrine of what believers held to at that time, which is it was a pretty amazing one, at least the one I had read it last time. So this is section 2. It says, the fallacy then of this exposition is manifest. For when Yahukanan proclaiming one Elohim, the Almighty, and one Yahushua Mashiach, the only begotten, by whom all things were made, declares that this was the Son of Elohim, this the only begotten, this the former of all things, this the true light who enlightens every man, this the creator of the world, this he that came to his own, this he that became flesh and dwelt among us. These men, by a plausible kind of exposition, perverting these statements, maintained that there was another monogenes, or, or only begotten, right? According to production, whom they also style archi. They also maintained that there was another deliverer and another logos, the son of monogenes, and another Mashiach, produced for the reestablishment of the pleroma. Thus it is that, resting from the truth every one of the expressions which have been cited, and taking a bad advantage of the names, they have transferred them to their own system, so that according to them, in all these terms, Yahukanon makes no mention of Yahuwah Yahushua Mashiach. For if he has named the Father, and Charis, and Monogenos, and Aletheia, and Logos, and Zoe, and Anthropos, and Ecclesia, according to their hypothesis, he has, by thus speaking, referred to the primary Ogdoad, in which there was as yet no Yahushua. And I didn't mention that before, but the Ogdoad literally means a grouping of 8. And it's also in the anti-Mashiach or Antichrist for Dummies videos. It's the 3 frog-like ruach oath that go out from their mouths that lead all the people to the great. I think it's the Battle of Armageddon. There, I don't want to misquote it, so I'm sorry for that. But the word for those 3 unclean ruach oath, like frogs, is Ogdoad. So you have the idea of the Trinity, which is what those videos go into great detail exposing. Real believers believe the Shema, that Elohim is one, and the Nicolaitan heretics that came in believed in a Trinity. But to continue, it says, in which there was as yet no Yahushua and no Mashiach, the teacher of Yahukanon. But that the emissary did not speak concerning their conjunctions, but concerning our Yahuwah, Yahushua Mashiach, whom he also acknowledges as the word of Elohim, he himself has made evident. For summing up his statements respecting the word previously mentioned by him, he further declares, and the word was made flesh and dwelt among us. But according to their hypothesis, the word did not become flesh at all, inasmuch as he never went outside of the pleroma. But that deliverer became flesh who was formed by a special dispensation out of all the eons, and was of a later date than the Word. Section 3. Learn then, ye foolish men, that Yahushua who suffered for us and who dwelt among us is himself the Word of Elohim. For if any other of the eons had become flesh for our deliverance, it would have been probable that the emissary spoke of another. But if the word of the Father who descended is the same also that ascended, he, namely, the only begotten Son of the only Elohim, who, according to the good or tov pleasure of the Father, became flesh for the sake of men, the emissary certainly does not speak regarding any other, or concerning any Ogdoad, but respecting our Yahuwah Yahushua Mashiach. For according to them, the Word did not originally become flesh. For they maintain that the deliverer assumed an animal body, formed in accordance with a special dispensation by an unspeakable providence, so as to become visible and palpable. Palpable, yeah. But flesh is that which was of old, formed for Adam, by Elohim out of the dust, And it is that, it is this that Yahukanon has declared the word of Elohim became. Thus is their primary and first begotten Ogdoad brought to naught. For since Logos and Monogenos and Zoe and Phos and Soter and Christos and the Son of Elohim and he who became incarnate for us have been proved to be one and the same, the Ogdoad which they have built up at once falls to pieces. And when this is destroyed, their whole system sinks into ruin. A system which they falsely dream into existence, and thus inflict injury on the scriptures while they build up their own hypothesis. Section 4. Then again, collecting a set of expressions and names scattered here and there in scripture, they twist them, as we have already said, from a natural to an unnatural sense. In so doing, they act like those who bring forward any kind of hypothesis. They fancy and they endeavor to support them out of the poems of Homer. Uh, so, this is his refutation of what we call soundbite theology, just so you know. All right. And then endeavor to support them out of the poems of Homer, so that the ignorant imagine that Homer actually composed the verses bearing upon that hypothesis, which has, in fact, been but newly constructed, and many others are led so far by the regularly formed sequence of the verses as to doubt whether Homer may not have composed them. Of this kind is the following passage, where one, describing Hercules as having been sent by Eurystheus to the dog in the infernal regions, does so by means of these Homeric verses, for there can be no objection to our citing these by way of illustration, since the same sort of attempt appears in both. Thus saying, there sent forth from his house deeply groaning, and this would have been the Odyssey, chapter 10, section 76. The hero Hercules conversant with mighty deeds, the same book, chapter 21, section 26. And then Eurystheus, or Eurystheus, the son of Cynthilis, descended from Perseus. This is from the Iliad, 29, section 1, 2, 3. And then he that might bring from Erebus the dog of gloomy Pluto. It's the same book, or section 8, book 8, section 368. And then another quote he has here, and he advanced like a mountain-bred lion, confident of strength. That's from the Odyssey, section, or book 6, section 130. And then another quote, rapidly through the city, while all his friends followed. And then both maidens and youths and much enduring old men. And another quote, mourning for him bitterly as one going forward to death. And another quote, but Mercury and the blue-eyed Minerva conducted him. And another quote, for she knew the mind of her brother, how it labored with grief. And all of these are literally random spots picked here and there throughout. It says, now what simple-minded man, I ask, would not be led away by such verses as these to think that Homer actually framed them so with reference to the subject indicated? But he who is acquainted with the Homeric writings will recognize these verses indeed, but not the subject to which they are applied, as knowing that some of them were spoken of Ulysses, others of Hercules himself, others still of Priam, and others again of Menelaus and Agamemnon. But if he takes them and restores each of them to its proper position, he at once destroys the narrative in question. In like manner, he also who retains unchangeable in his heart the rule of the truth, which he received by means of immersion, will doubtless recognize the names, the expressions and the parables taken from the scriptures, but will by no means acknowledge the blasphemous use which these men make of them. For, though he will acknowledge the gems, he will certainly not receive the fox instead of the likeness of the king. But when he has restored every one of the expressions quoted to its proper position, and has fitted it to the body of the truth, he will lay bare and prove to be without any foundation the figment of these heretics. Section 5. But since what may prove a finishing stroke to this exhibit or exhibition is wanting, so that anyone, on following out their farce to the end, may then at once append an argument which shall overthrow it, we have judged it well to point out, first of all, in what respects the very fathers or patriarchs of this fable differ among themselves, as if they were inspired by different spirits of error. For this very fact forms an a priori proof, or this is like it's a Latin term for pre-existing proof, or one that stands before acknowledgement of anything else, right? We get the word for a priority, or Polaris also. It's the one that everything revolves around. But it forms a priori proof that the truth proclaimed by the assembly is immovable, and that the theories of these men are but a tissue of falsehoods. And this is chapter 10, titled Unity of the Belief of the Assembly Throughout the Whole World. The assembly, though dispersed through the whole world, through our whole world, even to the ends of the earth, has received from the emissaries and their taught ones this belief in one Elohim, the Abba Almighty, maker of Shamayim and earth and the sea, and all things that are in them, and in one Mashiach Yahushua, the Son of Elohim, who became incarnate for our deliverance, and in the Kodesh Ruach, who proclaimed through the foretellers the dispensations of Elohim, and the advents, and the birth from a virgin, and the passion, and the resurrection from the dead, and the ascension into Shamayim in the flesh of the beloved Mashiach Yahushua, our Yahuwah, and his future manifestation from Shamayim in the esteem of the Father, or Abba, to gather all things in one, and to raise up anew all flesh for the whole race of man, in order that to Mashiach Yahushua, our Yahuwah, and Elohim, and deliverer and sovereign, according to the will of the invisible Abba, or Father, every knee should bow, of things in Shamayim, and things in earth, and things under the earth, and that every tongue should confess to him, and that he should execute right judgment, or righteous judgment towards all, that he may send ruachni, or spiritual wickednesses, and the messengers who transgressed and became apostates, together with the unrighteous, or the wicked and unrighteous, sorry, the iniquitous and unrighteous and wicked and profane among men, into everlasting fire, but may in the exercise of his favor confer immortality on the righteous and set apart, and those who have kept his commandments and have preserved in his love, some from the beginning and others from their repentance, and may surround them with everlasting esteem. Sometimes I read the parts in brackets because it gives the context, right? But sometimes it'll take out and it'll mess things up. So if you know, some were preserved in his love from the beginning, meaning all the patriarchs before he came, where they couldn't sin, there was no mediator for that purpose yet. So Adam through Noah is what he's speaking of there, and that's mentioned in the shepherd of Hermas in the building of the tower parables, if you recall. And then the others from their repentances, Abraham and all those that are believers after him that repent, and may surround them with everlasting esteem. Section 2. As I have already observed, the assembly having received this preaching and this belief, although scattered throughout the whole world, yet as if occupying but one house, carefully preserves it. She also believes these points, just as if she had but one inner being and one and the same heart. Might we have that once again? And she proclaims them and teaches them and hands them down with perfect harmony, as if she possessed only one mouth. For although the languages of the world are dissimilar, yet the import of the tradition is one and the same. For the assemblies which have been planted in Germany do not believe or hand down anything different, nor do those in Spain, nor in Gaul, nor those in the East, nor those in Mitzrayim, nor those in Libya. And if you remember, they were commanded to only go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, nor those which have been established in the central regions of the world. But as the sun, that creature of Elohim, is one and the same throughout the whole world, so also the preaching of the truth shines everywhere and enlightens all men that are willing to come to the knowledge of the truth, or to a knowledge of the truth. Nor will any one of the rulers in the assemblies, however highly gifted he may be in point of eloquence, teach doctrines different from these, for no one is greater than the master. Nor, on the other hand, will he who is deficient in power of expression inflict injury on the tradition. For the belief being ever one and the same, neither does one who is able at great length to discourse regarding it make any addition to it, nor does one who can say but little diminish it. So we don't add to or take away. Section 3. It does not follow because men are endowed with greater and less degrees of intelligence that they should therefore change the subject matter itself, and should conceive of some other Elohim besides him who is the framer, maker, and preserver of this creation or universe, as if he were not sufficient for them, or of another Mashiach or another only begotten. But the fact referred to simply implies this, that one may more accurately than another bring out the meaning of those things which have been spoken in parables, and accommodate them to the general scheme of the belief, and explain the operation and dispensation of Elohim connected with man's deliverance, and show that Elohim manifested long suffering in regard to the apostasy of the messengers who transgressed, as also with respect to the disobedience of men, and set forth why it is that one and the same Elohim has made some things temporal and some eternal, some shamayim and some earthly, and comprehend for what reason Elohim, though invisible, manifested himself to the foretellers, not under one form, but differently to different individuals, and show why it was that more covenants than one were given to mankind, and teach what was the special character of each of these covenants, and search out for what reason Elohim has concluded every man in unbelief, that he may have chesed loving kindness or mercy upon all, and gratefully describe on what account the word of Elohim became flesh and suffered, and relate why the advent of the Son of Elohim took place in these last times, that is, in the end, rather than in the beginning, and unfold what is contained in the scriptures concerning the end and things to come, and not be silent as to how it is that Elohim has made the nations, whose deliverance was despaired of, fellow heirs and of the same body, and partakers with the set apart ones. And discourse how it is that this mortal body shall put on immortality, and this corruptible shall put on incorruption, and proclaim in what sense Elohim says, quote, that is a people who was not a people, and she is beloved who was not beloved, unquote. And remember, he's going on what the rulers of the assemblies are supposed to do. They're not supposed to add or take away, but these are the things that they are. And that's quite a bit here. That's pretty amazing if we think about it. How much do we hear of this anymore is what I'd like to hear after we're done. But, and in what sense he says that more are the children of her that was desolate than of her who possessed a husband. For in reference to these points and others of a like nature, the emissary exclaims, "O the depths of the riches, both of the Chokmah and knowledge of Elohim! How unsearchable are his arbitrations, and his ways past finding out." But the superior skill spoken of is not found in this, that anyone should, beyond the creator and framer, conceive of the anathemius or an anathemesis of an erring aeon, their mother and his, and should thus proceed to such a pitch of blasphemy. And remember that anathemesis or sis is that first thought or whatever they called it. Nor does it consist in this, that he should again falsely imagine as being above this a pleroma, at one time supposed to contain 30, and at another time an innumerable tribe of eons. As these teachers who are destitute of truly El Brid Chokmah maintain, while the Yachad Kahal, or united into one assembly, possesses one and the same belief throughout the whole world, as we have already said. Just want to point out this word right here, Catholic Church. This is what Sixtus III instituted with the Theodosian Codex around 432 AD, where they were going to enforce by the sword the belief in the Trinity of three co equal, unbegotten, eternal beings in one, instead of our Father or our Abba being one alone and our Mashiach being sent by him as the firstborn of creation. But they also called themselves Catholic Christians and part of a church. We know that the word Catholic means universal, but it's not in the sense of the Yachad. Yachad means to be united into one. And the word Yachid, if you put a yod in there, it's what they have is the only begotten. When it's talking about Yitzhak, the promised seed is the Yachid of Abraham, and also our Mashiach is called the Yachid of our Abba. And we are also supposed to be made into one mind, one belief, one body in him as the head. So that's that word Yachid. It's separate from universal, which is an amalgamation of just taking in everything from everywhere to have it as the one that brings them all together. And then the church is the circus, if you recall. It comes directly from the word for the circus, right from Rome. And they instituted the circus to keep the peasants or the lay people distracted while they could run the government as they saw fit. But it was the church or the circus that they wanted as their means of deliverance, their place of worship, when Hadrian survived the earthquake of Antioch in 115 AD by hiding in the church or in the circus that was there. Um, yeah, I think that's the one's right there. So we'll pause for a moment. All right, so we skipped a few more chapters again to get ahead of the. He was explaining about Valentinian and Marcus and the Macronians and other Gnostic or heretical opinions, and going into the things they did, how they take the scriptures of the original covenant and twist them, how they take scriptures from the renewed covenant and twist them, and how they take stuff from things that they've written themselves or the apocryphal writings and they twist that also. And now we're on, this is chapter 22, titled Deviations of Heretics from the Truth. Section 1 says, the rule of truth which we hold is that there is one El Shaddai, who made all things by his word, and fashioned and formed out of that which had no existence all things which exist. Thus said the scriptures. To that effect, by the word of Yahuwah were the Shamayim established, and all the might of them by the ruach of his mouth. And again, all things were made by him, and without him was nothing made. There is no exception or deduction stated, but the Abba or Father made all things by him, whether visible or invisible, objects of sense or of intelligence, temporal on account of a certain character given them, or eternal. And these eternal things he did not make by messengers or by any power separated from his enonia. Yeah. For Elohim needs none of all these things, but is he who by his word in Ruach makes and disposes and governs all things, and commands all things into existence. He who formed the world, for the world is of all, is he who fashioned man. And he is the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov, above whom there is no other Elohim, nor initial principle, nor power, nor pleroma. He is the Abba of our Yahuwah Yahushua Mashiach, as we shall prove. Holding therefore this rule, we shall easily show, notwithstanding the great variety and multitude of their opinions, that these men have deviated from the truth. For almost all the different sects of heretics admit that there is one Elohim, but then by their pernicious doctrines, they change this truth into error, even as the nations do through idolatry, thus proving themselves ungrateful to him that created them. Moreover, they despise the workmanship of Elohim, speaking against their own deliverance, becoming their own bitterest accusers, and being false witnesses. Yet, reluctant as they may be, these men shall one day rise, or one yom rise again in the flesh, to confess the power of him who raises them from the dead. Now, he mentions this, as reluctant as they may be, they shall one day or one yom rise again in the flesh, because if you remember, they believed that they would be like the demons after death. They would be incorporeal, immortal ruach oath, or able to do as they will, and more powerful than their current state. And this is also something that you can see in the recognitions of Clement, where it was first promulgated by Simon the magician, who was very well versed in the Greek mythologies and the errant beliefs of the pagans. Right. So, and they will rise again to confess the power of him who raises them from the dead, but they shall not be numbered among the righteous on account of their unbelief. Since, therefore, it is a complex and multiform task to detect and convict all the heretics, and since our design is to reply to them all according to their special characters, we have judged it necessary, first of all, to give an account of their source and root, in order that by getting a knowledge of their most exalted bythus, you may comprehend the nature of the tree which has produced such fruits. All right, thank you all for your time. I'm not certain if we'll be able to read anymore, but if not, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You have a wonderful rest of your week and wonderful Sabbath.